concerned to see about impeachment if the Dems take the majority?
Well, we've already seen this movie. They've already tried it twice. I'm certain they would try it again.
President Trump won't be on the ticket in the 2026 midterms, so GOP leaders are discussing ways to turn out the MAGA faithful. One way to do that, talk up the prospects that Trump could be impeached for a record third time if Democrats take back the House, even though Democratic leaders are so far wary of doing so. My new reporting this morning with my colleague Sarah Ferris details how Trump and GOP leaders are plotting their midterm strategy, trying to woo key candidates, including Governor Brian Kemp for a Georgia Senate run. But not all Republicans think the strategy of talking up a potential Trump impeachment is enough to win.
If the Republican campaign message in the midterms is vote for House Republicans and vote for Republican candidates for Senate to stop the Democrats from impeaching Trump, the American people are not going to care because they've seen that show twice and it didn't matter. It won't work. No.
Excellent panel is back. I mean, look, midterm elections, as we know, are typically very painful for a party in power. We have problems with the economy, concerns about Trump overreach. Democrats are very confident that things will change next November. However, this is a small map. This is a battleground where very few districts are truly at play. There are only 3 Republicans in districts in which Kamala Harris won, which is perhaps why they want to figure out ways Republicans do to animate the base and win a potentially close election here. Look at how they talk about impeachment polls historically among the American public. The first Trump impeachment, just 51% of Americans thought that was not the way to go. Clinton impeachment, 65% of Americans at the time did not think it was the way to go. Even Nixon, as they were moving down that road, 51% thought it was not the way to go. It was different after January 6th. A majority of voters viewed it that way. That was a different situation, of course. However, that explains to you why they're trying to amp up the base. What are you hearing about the way that Trump and the Republicans are viewing their chances in the midterms?
I mean, listen, I think they're concerned. Obviously, the economy is going to be the biggest issue. It was certainly in the last election. And Republicans are concerned that they're going down this road of tariffs. What is the policies that they're going to be able to do, especially when you look at DOJ cutting jobs kind of across the country? But this impeachment issue, I think, is red meat for the Trump base. This is something that would galvanize his base to get them out, get them into rallies. This is the kind of fighting mode that Trump likes, and the idea that Democrats are so out of touch. And that's why I think you really see leadership in the Democratic Party saying, like, hey, guys, no, let's not talk about this.
Let's talk about the economy as well. But what was interesting that is there was one of the most vulnerable Senate Democratic candidates, Senate Democrats, Jon Ossoff, at a rally back home, just a town hall a couple weeks ago. He was asked about impeachment. He suggested that Trump and his actions on this cryptocurrency venture suggested that perhaps that's enough for an impeachable conduct, or at least an investigation into it. I asked him about those comments that he made.
It appears that the president's business and family are being personally enriched through this cryptocurrency venture. That kind of misconduct, I think, exceeds virtually any prior standard for that kind of inquiry in the House.
It's hard to separate the politics. Republicans are already going after you on those comments. Do you think it'll become an issue in your campaign?
Oh, I stand by those comments 100%.
I mean, we should never take impeachment off the table. We should never take where we see law breaking. We should never take accountability off the table.
That's the tension between what the Democratic leaders want to talk about and what a lot of members say, that they need to hold Donald Trump, what they say, accountable for going beyond the Constitution.
It is a tension. You know, on one side, you have this concern in the Democratic Party around them being too cautious and pulling their punches against the Trump administration, and really almost a yearning, mostly on the progressive base, for accountability. But on the other side, too, you've had really an inconsistency of what to focus on when it comes to that message. Do you hone in on DOJ efforts, on the economy, on tariffs, on immigration, what have you? And we're seeing the collision of those two sources of anxiety here. Those that want the party to focus on the issues and those that actually see an opening for real accountability. What's absent in all of these conversations, though, is actually putting forth a consistent agenda, a consistent plan that you can rebut against the Trump administration here.
Can I ask you just about Trump's mindset as we head into the midterms? Yeah. We're hearing that he's probably going to do a lot of rallies, endorsements. He's very focused on trying to keep the House. What's your expectation of his involvement in the midterms? Because, look, Democrats actually would be happy if he was on the campaign trail.
They would. And he loves nothing more than being on the campaign trail, right? He loves those rallies. And comments like that, what you just played, that is exactly what Trump and his team want to hear. He does best when he's embattled, when he's pushing against something, when he can play the victim and say that he is being targeted. You saw what happened with his numbers. They're looking back at when that first indictment came down and how suddenly he was in the wilderness and then he became the center of gravity for the political universe and really used that and turned it into a galvanizing moment for him. If Democrats continue on this train, you better bet they're going to try to do the same thing. Whether it'll work or not, that's the question.
In the meantime, there's a big effort to try to get some key candidates in the race. We've heard Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, flew down to Atlanta over the Easter break, did meet with him and Kemp's wife. Also, other senators have been in touch with him. We heard that Trump himself had a conversation with Kemp back in February about the Senate race. There were no commitments made that we were hearing, but given that Kemp did not overturn the election in 2020 and became the whipping boy for Trump for so long, could Trump get behind someone who would be the biggest recruit for the Senate GOP?
I mean, what we're hearing from the Trump team is they don't need MAGA acolytes. They need to keep the majority, right? And I think there has been kind of a truce or a willingness to work with John Thune, who clearly wants Brian Kemp to be the candidate. I think the big question here is, does Brian Kemp, what governor have we ever seen that likes to go into the Senate? The answer is literally zero.
Yes, exactly.
So he looks at what he's been doing in this state there, being able to be the number one kind of, office holder in chief to go into the Senate and dysfunction here in Washington. It's a hard sell, I'm sure, to be made.
And if he says no, that'll be a huge black eye for the GOP, certainly given this push. I do want to turn to another story about Senator John Fetterman. First, I want to show you what he said to me about all this debate. One, about how some on the left are saying that we should rail against an oligarchy, that the United States is being run by an oligarchy. And then two, about some on the left calling for impeachment. Calling it an oligarchy. What do you think? Is that smart politically?
Well, I think the vast majority of people may have to Google what that is.
Some of these guys on the House say that if you do get the majority in the House, impeachment should be part of the equation.
That's just dumb. I mean, that's not going anywhere. I mean, it's been done twice.
So this all came in before the story was reported in New York Magazine about John Fetterman's, his mental health. It's because he's been very public about his struggles in the last year. But this is a news story that just came out on Friday. The headline, all by himself. John Fetterman insists he is in good health, but staffers past and present say they no longer recognize the man they once know. We have reached out to Fetterman's office for comment. Fetterman did say, the New York Magazine, he denied that there was anything that was amiss, and he felt like the best version of himself. You interviewed Fetterman when he ran and he won his first campaign. What's your reaction to this? Can he survive questions about whether he can continue in office?
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway for me from that story was the lack of transparency. And that was what I initially pushed for in that first interview, is we need to really try to understand what is going on, and that's what voters deserve. That's what his constituents deserve. And I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, is the amount of sort of obscuring that his team has had to do as he has worked through some of these challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things here, right? As long as he continues to go and do interviews and he's engaging with the press, I think that kind of tamps down some of the at least public concerns. You did have a couple of his colleagues, both Republicans and Democrats, Senator Welch, Katie Britt, defending him, saying they hadn't noticed any of these challenges as well. And so I think, obviously, kind of the Senate famously, they protect their own.
Yes.
But this is going to be a thread that he and his staff are going to have to figure out how they're going to answer, because now that this story has run, there's going to be a lot of follow-up.
And in the subsequent election cycles, when he's up for re-election, will he run? Will he face primary from the left, given that he has emerged as this anti-left voice within the Democratic Party? All big questions in the weeks ahead.